Welcome everyone to our Packers News live chat alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers had no time to get into a turkey coma. They shook it off this morning, hit the field for their final practice, gearing up for Sunday's game against the Bears. We'll take a look at today's practice, we'll hit on the injury report, plus we'll also take a look at the Bears special teams units in just a moment. Before we get into that, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. We want to hear what's on your mind about the Packers, the Bears, whatever you had for Thanksgiving dinner last night. Jim and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation in just a moment. The Packers were like, finally, we are going to have a fully healthy offense heading into this Sunday's game against the Bears. And then wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling popped up on the injury report with an Achilles injury. He did not practice today. He's listed as questionable heading into Sunday's game against the Bears. Valdes-Scantling fills a very particular role in this offense. He is known primarily for being a deep threat. He leads the league in average yards per catch with over 20 yards per catch. It's quite a steep number there. If he can't go, which wide receiver is most likely to fill his role in the offense?
Yeah, this is really interesting because, Davante Adams is such a good, well-rounded receiver. Obviously, he can get downfield, but it's a different type of explosive play that Davante Adams provides. And similarly, Allen Lazard. Look at what he did in New Orleans the last time, he was able to play kind of full go before he got hurt. What was he doing? He was replacing Davante Adams while Marquez Valdes-Scantling was getting some different coverages in other areas. Valdes-Scantling, and we've said this, Olivia, when he has struggled at times and people wonder about his role, he is the deep threat. He is the guy who can flat out outrun anyone. He's the fastest receiver they have. That we know of. I mean, Malik Taylor maybe in terms of the 40 is in that realm, but I don't know. I don't. Matt LaFleur hasn't really taken a Taylor or a Shepard or he didn't bring up Robert Foster off the practice squad when he had that guy. People wonder about Seth Roberts. I mean, these aren't guys that the team is just rolling out in place of injured receivers. So my gut is you see Equanimeous St. Brown, maybe Malik Taylor shows up for a play or two, but they're not replacing MVS, if that makes sense. I think you're going to see Aaron Jones maybe up on some teams. Excuse me, that's one of the dogs is waking up here from a nap. But yeah, I think that's what we see. Not a direct replacement, but a similar, a different style of play, I guess.
What's your dog's 40 time, Jim? Can they sub in for the Packers this Sunday if Valdes-Scantling or St. Brown can't go?
Oh my God, it's funny. So the puppy that is awake now is Zosha. We actually did this at one of those dog festivals. Because it's Wisconsin, the dogs do run 40s at this thing, and what we found out is Zosha's kind of slow. She's at like a 4.6, 4.7. So yeah, she's more of a long runner, I think.
She doesn't have anything, unfortunately, on newly free agent wide receiver. I suppose he's not a free agent yet. He's still going through the waiver wire. The Texans released wide receiver Kenny Stills, who is primarily known for his speedy abilities. He ran a 4.38 40 at the Combine quite a while ago. However, that's just 100th of a second slower than Marquez Valdes-Scantling. There are a lot of steps for him to go through the waiver wire. If the Packers were interested in him at all, they would have to be able to beat out some of the other teams, and they're lower in the priority order. Plus, they'd have to be willing to sign him for his cap hit, which would be $2 million this season. How realistic is Stills to Green Bay?
Well, I think let's address the financial part. I think the David Bakhtiari restructure, Tom Silverstein, wrote about all those numbers. I think they can handle $2 million this year. And then whatever is left next year and the year beyond, you deal with it after that. So that's always probably the biggest hurdle. But as you said, the Packers are 7-3. They're pretty low on the priority claim. So I mean, let's look at a team like Chicago, for instance. They're 5-5. They've got relatively unproven receivers beyond Allen Robinson. Why wouldn't they give it a shot? Why wouldn't the Minnesota Vikings? Adam Thielen is on COVID reserve. Just the Jefferson kid's coming up, but again, you can play if you have the cap room, and $2 million is a manageable number. Kenny Stills is better than a lot of other guys at this point. So even if there's an onboarding process with COVID and all this other stuff, there's definitely, I would think, other teams in the AFC and the NFC that would put in claims. And we've seen this with the Packers, Olivia. They have put in claims on several players that have been put on waivers over the year, and they just, because, how good they are, they don't get them.
Let's take a look ahead to this weekend's matchup against the Bears. This could be the Packers' 100th franchise victory over the Chicago Bears. However, they're going to have to beat them on all phases, including special teams. Return specialist Cordero Patterson has been very successful. Just this past week, he had a 104-yard kick return for a touchdown. The Packers' special team units were average, and then over the last 5 games, they have just completely fallen off. They've allowed a blocked punt, a punt return for a touchdown, plus they also turned the ball over just last week. How can the Packers special teams units beef up against the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, special teams to me aren't any different than your offense or your defense. At this point, they are what they are. Maybe if they signed Tavon Austin, as we reported, they were, working them out. I think you can add a returner. So if that happens, I think maybe a change comes. But until then, this is the group. And that means Tyler Ervin or Darius Shepard or Chandon Sullivan, guys we know, are going to be okay in kick return because the coverages aren't great. Other teams are willing to challenge them. I think if you're Sean Menenga, what you want to do is get back to last year. The bar was kind of low, right? And so what did he do? No penalties, no mistakes, field the ball, give it back to Aaron Rodgers. They haven't done that. So I think that's where they're trying to get, to me, what they will try to get back to is play pretty boring, consistent special teams, because right now they're not boring and they're not consistent, but it's going the wrong way. And Olivia, frankly, I don't know if they have the playmakers to create their own plays, so they need to go back to preventing other teams from doing so.
Speaking of return specialist Tyler Ervin, he is likely to make his return this upcoming Sunday after sitting out last week's game against the Colts with a rib injury. This has not been Tyler Ervin's best season in his career, especially with the Packers compared to last year. He's averaging 17.6 yards per return on kick returns, which is about 9 yards per return lower than he averaged last season. How can he make an improvement as he comes back for these last several games of the season?
Yeah, this plays into, the lack of explosiveness. So again, it's where's the bar? So last year when he was claimed off waivers, the Packers had negative punt return yards. So literally 0 would be an improvement. Well, he came in and actually went upfield and provided a spark on punt return. Kick return was okay, average 25 yards a kick. Now this year it's definitely declined. Is it Ervin? Is it his responsibilities on offense? Let's be honest, Olivia. He is far more involved in the offensive game plan and is important to what they do. That, not saying he's not practicing or care or anything like that. I think it's just the focus of Tyler Ervin has shifted from a year ago, and clearly, the kick block unit is not performing at a level either to kind of set some of these things up. So, I think Tyler Ervin, in short, his return is a boost to the offense. I don't really know what it's going to do for the return game.
Let's head over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for some of your questions, whatever is on your mind. If you have not yet gotten your question in, don't worry, not too late. Head on over to the comments right now. We'll start with Andy over on Facebook. Good to see you, Andy. Andy asks, do you have a COVID update on running back A.J. Dillon and inside linebacker Chris Barnes? Gotta be soon. Both of those players are currently on COVID-19 reserve. Barnes has actually made a quote-unquote return to practice. He is not returning to practice with the team and getting involved in stretch and team drills, individual drills. He has been off to the side working in with the rehab group. He's been out for several weeks. It's going to take him some time to get up to speed. A.J. Dillon, we've been told by head coach Matt LaFleur, has returned to the facility. However, we have not yet seen him on the field. When can Packers fans expect to see both of these two players back in action?
Yeah, honestly, Andy, got to be soon. I don't think you can put that on COVID-19, to be honest. The protocols are changing weekly. So perhaps 2 weeks ago, they thought they'd be back, and now the protocols have changed. Markers have changed. The goalposts have changed, whatever metaphor you want to use. And maybe A.J. Dillon and Chris Barnes can no longer meet the new requirements, or they haven't yet. So we don't know. I mean, and until they're back, and until, frankly, they're allowed to speak or able to speak to us and the public and let us know, if they were symptomatic, they weren't, or they did. If they did, if it was bad. I mean, there's so many variables there, Andy, that it, as Olivia laid out right there, they're returning in some capacity. But in terms of actually playing, it feels like it's going to be a little bit yet because clearly they're not even on the practice field.
Thanks, Andy, for joining us and for your question. We have a question here from Linda, and Steve also has a question about punter J.K. Scott. Linda wants to know, what is up with punter J.K. Scott lately? Scott was questionable to play last week against the Colts. He did not travel with the team, and he ended up flying the day of the game to join the Packers in Indianapolis. Ultimately, he was able to go. He didn't have a very strong night. He only punted 3 times, and he averaged about 39 yards per punt. What is going on with J.K. Scott lately?
Well, I mean, yeah, again, personal issue, and this is the bad part for fans about the pandemic. I mean, normally we would have talked to J.K. Scott in the locker room after the Colts game to, it'd have been up to him to determine if he wanted to tell us, like, the personal issues that he had to deal with. But we'd be also talking to J.K. throughout this stretch of, are you being asked to kick 36-yard high kicks? Are there coverage breakdowns? Some of these things we don't know. We can't talk to anybody on punt coverage, about what's happening there. So, and coordinator Sean Menenga is available every week, but again, there's only so much he can say or will say, and it's a different level than what the players are actually feeling. So, long way to say, Linda, we honestly don't know. We don't know what he's being asked to do. If, other than the punt return touchdown, where I think Matt LaFleur said, Olivia, the kick was probably a little too long for that play, but otherwise, honestly, we just don't know.
Thanks, Linda, for your question. Let's take a question here from Jared, going back to our conversation earlier about wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Is there a plan to bring someone up if Marquez Valdes-Scantling can't play? The Packers have until tomorrow to announce if they want to decide to bring up players from the practice squad and make them active for game day. We don't know exactly what the Packers will do. The last wide receiver that they called up a few games ago was Juwann Winfree, who has been on the practice squad now for, I guess it's only been a few weeks now. It's hard to tell exactly how long players have been in the building as the weeks go by this season. However, if Valdes-Scantling isn't able to go, or if St. Brown isn't able to go, who are the Packers likely to elevate from the practice squad from a wide receiver standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I'll lean with that. I mean, Winfrey's probably the guy. I mean, there was a reason, they saw something in the practices that warranted his call up. He played actually quite a bit against Jacksonville. Now, I think he showed, some rookie mistakes. I think there was a whiff block on a play that got blown up. But also I think he's out there to block. That's what it looked like in that Jacksonville game. I don't know if that means he has the speed to, quote unquote, replace an MVS. In that game, again, Allen Lazard wasn't available. So maybe Winfrey was that kind of bigger body they thought could play. I know fans wonder about Seth Roberts because he's a name that people know. He's a veteran. If he's, has shown enough here in these practices to grasp the playbook. And, when Adams has been limited and Lazard limited, I mean, some of these other guys are getting reps with Rodgers. So, we could see Roberts as well, just if they feel, okay, he's going to be where he's supposed to be. But they've got some, we'll just say Olivia and Jared, they have some flexibility. They still can pull up 2 players off to replace Barnes and Dillon because of the COVID. You figure one of them will be Mike Weber again. And then, they've got the 2 practice squad promotions. And remember, as of today, Montravius Adams is going to be out, so there also may be a defensive lineman, being worked in there too.
Thanks so much, Jared, for your question. Let's go over to Dale on Facebook. Dale asks, when are the Packers going to start playing outside linebacker Rashan Gary more? Gary had about 43% of the defensive snaps this past week against the Colts, and he was pretty productive. He had a pass defense. He was able to get a quarterback hit as well, especially compared to outside linebacker Preston Smith, who has dropped off considerably from last season's double-digit sack numbers. He's only got a sack and a half this season. How likely is it that Packers fans start seeing Rashan Gary on the field a little bit more?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting, Olivia, because it's Preston Smith obviously is coming off a 12-sack season, a lot of money. What's the balance there of Rashan Gary? Is he outplaying Preston Smith? Does Preston Smith deserve to be taken off the field? What leeway do you give a sixth-year player who has a track record? Even if it wasn't 12 sacks, I mean, Smith has had, 7 to 9 in years past. It reminds me a little bit of baseball, Olivia, in a way, where, like, you give that veteran guy, how long do you give him to work out of the slump, for instance? And then you've got a guy like Gary. Is he showing out and playing better because it's only limited snaps? If he plays more, is he wearing down? Does he not know how? So there's a lot of interesting elements to this, Dale, that I think the Packers coaching staff has to work through. But I do think you would see Gary more. I mentioned defensive line might be a little short. Tyler Lancaster's banged up. I mean, Gary's the type of bigger body who maybe they can work him in some early downs to help with, in case they do run it. And it's not just pass rush. So that could be a way to get Gary on the field more, even if it's not a go after the quarterback situation, if you will.
Thanks so much, Dale, for your question. I'll throw in a comment here from Smumster just for you, Jim, over on Periscope. Oh, sorry, this was not the question that I wanted. This was his question. He said that it's not coming up. Oh, no. Oh, it was from Daniel. I apologize. Daniel said that your dog is better than quarterback Mitch Trubisky. I guess we can run with this a little bit if you want. Quarterback Mitch Trubisky is likely to make this start, or I suppose Bears head coach Jim Nagy confirmed today that he will be making the start against the Packers this upcoming Sunday. What should the Packers expect from Trubisky that they wouldn't necessarily expect from Nick Foles, who had been the Bears quarterback for the last several weeks until he got recently injured?
Yeah, it's really there's two differences. If you're the Bears, you're going to try to take the one positive difference, which is the fact that Mitch can run around. He can get out of the pocket, he can evade, he can make plays, extend plays, things like that, kind of the off-schedule stuff that Nick Foles just frankly doesn't do. Now, the bad thing, I guess, for the Bears, and the reason Mitch was benched is he doesn't read defenses very well. He doesn't throw a particularly accurate ball. So, while at times in his 4 games the last couple of years against Mike Pettine's defenses, Trubisky has performed, the Bears have been fairly competitive. I'd argue that's more defensively and Allen Robinson as opposed to the quarterback. So, my dog is pretty good. She seems to be able to read the bunnies and the squirrels coverages in the yard pretty good, much to my chagrin. But, yeah, I think, Trubisky presents that one issue, but honestly, that's not anything different than what he's shown the last 2 years for the Packers defenders.
Thank you, Daniel, for your question. Andy wants to know, how tough will it be to run on Chicago? Chicago's run defense on paper does not appear to exactly jump off. They're ranked 15th in the league in yards, 25th in attempts, so teams aren't exactly running it on them a ton. The Packers like to run the ball. However, where the Bears defense has been very successful has been in the red zone. They've only allowed three rushing touchdowns, they're third in the NFL in rushing touchdowns. Opponents have only rushed 6 times in the red zone. So, Jim, that being said, how likely is it that the Packers can pop off for some big runs against the Bears this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's at least one a game. Aaron Jones is an explosive runner. I think he had a 15-yarder against the Colts. I think he had Jamal Williams had a decent run against Tampa Bay. I mean, it's the nature of the game. They'll probably pop 1, maybe 2. When I say explosive runs, that's 10 yards or more. But, like those other defenses, though, I doubt the Packers are going to be able to impose their will. Akeem Hicks will be a game-time decision. Even if he can't play, I think that affects the pass rush more. Not that he isn't a very, very good run defender, because he is so good. That would be a huge loss if he can't go. But I do think the Bears do have some just big bodies, and their linebackers are so fast that they can kind of still limit the Packers' run game in that way. And frankly, Olivia, for as good as the Packers have been with shuffling their offensive line, I don't know if that's been a good thing for the run game. They've protected Aaron Rodgers pretty well, but I don't know if moving Elton Jenkins around, and then there's John Runyon Jr., and then the tackles are switching. Like, I don't know if that has helped, kind of break this run game going like it was earlier in the year. So, Andy, I think, they're going to try to run it, but I would expect what you saw against Tampa and Indianapolis to a degree where maybe not as much as you would like, maybe not as successful as Matt LaFleur would like.
Center Corey Linsley is listed as questionable as he's been dealing with a back injury this week. He has been practicing. There is a chance that the Packers could regain some consistency along the offensive line this Sunday against the Bears. Perhaps that will have an implication on the run game. Thank you, Andy, for your question. Thank all of you very much for joining us on this Friday evening. We appreciate it. We will be back on Sunday to preview the game against the Bears about 90 minutes before kickoff, so make sure you come back over here to PackersNews.com to join us once again. For Jim Owczarski, I'm Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.